The morning rush at Maple Mart was in full swing, sunlight spilling through the wide glass walls, glinting off polished tile floors and perfectly stacked shelves. The soft beep of scanners echoed rhythmically like a heartbeat, and shopping carts rolled lazily through the aisles. Outside, the small town streets buzzed with warmth and chatter, the kind of peaceful morning that made everything feel ordinary. But inside Register 3, something extraordinary was about to unfold. Emily Carter stood behind the counter, her blue uniform freshly ironed, but her spirit visibly worn. Her hands moved with practiced precision, scanning items and offering gentle smiles that barely hid her fatigue. Every so often, her gaze drifted to the clock, 9:42 a.m., the time her father's nurse usually called to confirm his morning medication. But today, no call came. A flicker of worry flashed across her face before she quickly masked it with a smile for the next customer. Emily had been working double shifts for months. Her father, once a mechanic with calloused hands and a big laugh, had been paralyzed from the waist down after a car accident. The bills never stopped coming. So Emily stayed strong. She always stayed strong. Then the bell above the glass door chimed. A man in a gray suit strode in, his movements sharp, deliberate. Mark Johnson. He was the kind of man who looked like the world always owed him something. His phone was pressed to his ear, voice curt and cold. "I said close the deal today, not tomorrow." He hung up hard, exhaling frustration. The tension around him was almost visible, like static. He grabbed a bottle of water, a pack of gum, and a magazine before stepping into Emily's line. She greeted him softly. "Good morning, sir. How are you today?" He didn't answer. He just stared at his watch. Tap, tap, tap. As she scanned the items, the register screen flickered, a slight delay, a common glitch. She smiled nervously. "Sorry, it's been freezing up a bit today." She entered the last price manually, handed him the total, and took his card. The machine beeped twice. Then came the mistake. A miscount of 20 cents in his change. Mark noticed instantly. "You shorted me." Emily blinked, checking the screen. "Oh, sorry, sir. It must have..." Before she could finish, clink, clink, clang. Coins scattered across the counter, bouncing onto the floor like tiny bullets. Every sound pierced through the silence that suddenly swallowed the store. "Learn to do your job right." Mark's voice boomed, sharp enough to cut glass. The other customers froze. A mother holding a toddler covered her child's ears. The bag boy standing at the next register stopped mid-motion, his eyes wide. Even the store's gentle background music seemed to fade away. Emily stood frozen, her cheeks burning. Her lips trembled as she whispered, I'm sorry." She bent down, gathering the coins, her reflection glimmering faintly in their silver surfaces. Each one felt heavier than it should have. He turned away disgusted, muttering, "Unbelievable." But what happened next would shock everyone watching. Behind the counter, high above on the ceiling, a small red light blinked quietly, the security camera. It had captured every frame, his anger, her humiliation, the hush that followed. Inside the manager's office, David Miller, a man in his 50s with calm gray eyes, stared at the monitor in silence. He'd worked with Emily for 3 years. He'd seen her arrive early, stay late, skip breaks, but never once lose her kindness. Now watching the footage, his jaw tightened. "She doesn't deserve this," he muttered under his breath. But Emily didn't know. She kept working. She kept smiling, even when her eyes shimmered with unshed tears. Customers came and went, some awkwardly offering kind smiles, others pretending not to have seen what happened. She just kept going. By noon, she'd served 50 more people. Her hands didn't shake anymore. Her voice steadied, but her heart felt bruised. When her shift finally ended, she clocked out quietly and stepped outside. The sun was still shining, warm and gentle, yet she felt like standing in shadow. She took a slow breath, glancing at her reflection in the glass door before walking home. Inside the store, David replayed the footage one more time, his hand hovering over the mouse. A thought struck him. People needed to see this. Not just the cruelty, but her grace. Without a word, he saved the clip, labeled it, and sent it to the store's staff chat. "Watch this. We can learn something from her." Within hours, the video had spread quietly among employees. Some watched in anger, others in shame. One worker even said, "If I ever act like that guy, fire me on the spot." And somewhere, that same evening, as Mark Johnson drove home in his luxury sedan, music playing low, he felt oddly satisfied, proud even. He convinced himself he'd been right. He'd stood up for himself, demanded competence. But as the sun dipped lower and painted the world gold, his phone buzzed on the passenger seat. He ignored it at first. Then again, buzz, buzz. Finally, he glanced over. The sender was unknown. The message was short. "You might want to see this." Below it, a link. He frowned, tapping it almost carelessly. But as the video loaded, his grip on the wheel tightened. There he was, himself, standing at Register 3, face twisted in anger, coins flying, words cruel and sharp. But what caught him off guard wasn't his rage. It was her. The way she held her composure, the way she whispered, "I'm sorry," with tears she refused to let fall. The video ended. His reflection stared back at him from the dark phone screen. For the first time that day, Mark felt something shift in his chest. Not pride, not victory, but the beginning of shame. He exhaled shakily, eyes darting back to the message. A second notification popped up beneath it. You don't know who she really is. Watch tomorrow. Mark's heart began to race. What could that mean? Who was she? The engine idled in the fading sunlight as he stared down at his phone, unaware that what he'd just seen was only the beginning of a truth that would bring him to tears. The screen glowed in the darkness of Mark's car, the faint reflection of his face flickering against the glass. The video began the same way the moment had played out in real life, his voice sharp and cutting echoing through the speakers. Learn to do your job right. Then the sound of coins clattering, a pause, and the soft, trembling whisper, I'm sorry, sir. He watched it again, and again, each replay sliced deeper than the last. His own cruelty stared back at him, his clenched jaw, the disgust in his eyes, the arrogance in his posture. But then something changed. The video didn't fade to black. It kept going. At first, Mark frowned, confused. The footage shifted. Same parking lot, but later in the day. The sun was lower now, painting the pavement with golden streaks. There she was, Emily Carter, the same cashier he'd humiliated hours earlier. Only this time, she wasn't behind the counter. She was kneeling beside an elderly man in a wheelchair, feeding him carefully from a small lunchbox. Her hair was tied back, the uniform jacket gone, but her smile was still there, soft, tired, but radiant. The man laughed weakly at something she said, and she wiped a tear from her own cheek before handing him a sip of water. Mark froze. The contrast was brutal. The woman he had treated like she was nothing was out here, caring for someone who clearly meant everything to her. The video zoomed slightly, enough for the manager's voice to be heard faintly off camera. She does this every day, he said. That's her dad. Mark's throat tightened. For the first time in years, he couldn't find a single word to say. He leaned back in his seat, his chest rising and falling unevenly. The sound of Emily's laughter echoed faintly from his phone, gentle, pure, undeserving of the pain he'd caused. And then, the memories began to surface. His own mother's hands, rough, tired, always counting coins at the kitchen table. She'd worked as a cashier, too. 2 jobs, night shifts. He used to hate seeing her in that old green uniform, exhausted but smiling through every customer's complaint. The memory hit him like a freight train. He remembered how embarrassed he'd been when she once dropped change at a grocery store and a stranger mocked her. He hadn't defended her. He just stood there. Now, years later, he had become that stranger. He turned off the engine and sat in silence, the sunlight streaming through the windshield, feeling heavier than ever. That night, sleep never came. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Emily's face, her humiliation replaying, the sound of those coins hitting the counter, the tiny quiver in her voice when she apologized for something that wasn't her fault. The guilt sat like a weight on his chest. By morning, he knew what he had to do. The next day, Maple Mart was just as busy as ever. The warm glow of sunlight spilled through the big front windows, casting long reflections across the floor. Shoppers moved in and out, unaware that something quietly extraordinary was about to happen. At 9 a.m., the automatic doors slid open and Mark walked in. Gone was the expensive suit. He wore a simple shirt, sleeves rolled up, a bouquet of daisies in one hand and a white envelope in the other. His steps were slower this time. The air seemed thicker, heavier, as whispers followed him from aisle to aisle. Emily was at Register 3 again, her same station, her same gentle focus. When she looked up and saw him, her face froze. The color drained from her cheeks. For a moment, neither spoke. You could hear the faint rustle of grocery bags, the soft beep of a distant scanner, and then silence. Mark took a slow breath and stepped forward. Emily, he began, his voice trembling, I came here yesterday angry. His eyes met hers, red-rimmed but steady. But I saw the video, and now I see. I wasn't angry at you. I was angry at myself. He placed the bouquet gently on the counter. The daisy's yellow petals caught the sunlight, glowing like tiny suns. Then he handed her the envelope. This is for you. I don't expect forgiveness. I just needed to say I'm sorry. Emily hesitated. Her hands shook slightly as she opened it. Inside was a handwritten note, the words uneven but sincere. You reminded me of my mother. I failed her once. I won't fail again. Please use this to help your dad. Tucked behind the letter was a check. Her eyes glistened. For a moment, she couldn't speak. Then, softly, barely audible, she said, Thank you. For seeing me. Mark nodded, unable to hold her gaze any longer. He turned to leave, but before he could take another step, the store manager appeared from his office doorway, watching silently. Around them, a hush fell over the store. Every shopper had stopped to witness the quiet exchange. No one spoke. No one judged. Mark walked toward the exit, the sound of his footsteps echoing through the sunlit aisles. As he reached the glass doors, he looked back one last time. Emily stood there, clutching the daisies, her shoulders trembling, but this time she was smiling. Outside, the morning light wrapped the parking lot in gold. The same sunlight that had seen cruelty the day before now seemed to glow with forgiveness. Mark took a deep breath and closed his eyes for a moment, as if letting something inside him finally break free. But just as he reached his car, his phone buzzed again. Another message. The same unknown number. He frowned, opening it slowly. There was no text this time, just a short video clip. It was the same footage of Emily and her father. But at the end, a new moment appeared. Emily turned toward the camera and whispered to someone behind it. If only people knew what kindness really costs. Mark's eyes widened. He looked back at the store through the bright glare of sunlight, his heart pounding faster. Something about that line didn't sound like it was meant for him. He didn't know it yet, but that single sentence would lead him to uncover something about Emily and about himself that would change both of their lives forever.